Good evening to everyone here, and today it's my privilege to have a quick chat with Jesal Mehta, who is the founder and CEO of an organization named Aavenir. Aavenir was established in 2019, and as we are gradually growing here in 3 years, we took an opportunity to have a quick chit chat with Jesal today. Hello Jesal, thank you for being a part of this conversation. Wherein today for next 30 minutes we will be walking with you an exciting journey about how, why you started Aavenir with us, and what is it that you see Aavenir getting into in next 3 or 5 years. And of course there are many other associated queries that we all have that I'll be asking you to.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So to begin with, let's start with the beginning, right? Why Aavenir?
Why Avni? I think that's a great question. Popular belief is that you have a founder has a great idea and they say, okay, let's start a company because I can change the world with that. That did not happen. In my prior life, I built organizations. I like building the organizations, essentially. So with this, I also wanted to just build an organization. I had built the organization for others in the past. And now this time I wanted to do for us with my own idea, with my own team and with my own culture and everything around that, right? And some other beliefs around that. And so I decided to start an organization first and then started looking for that idea. So when that happens, you go to your comfort zone. What was my comfort zone was the contract management, the procurement, the code to cash, which I've been working in that space for the last 20 years. And so I went back to that comfort zone and said, yeah, I think I can do something in that. I see there's an opportunity there. And that's kind of how it started in brief. And after I left my last job, Aptus was kind of not doing it for 6 months and just thinking what's next. Usually that's my style. I mean, even before that, I left the job and sat around for like 6 months, did some thinking and said, what do you want to do next? Same thing I was doing after Aptus for like 6 months. It was a winter time in Ahmedabad. There's a cafe called Cafe Farmland, not too far from our house. I and my wife used to regularly go there in the evening, and they have this bonfire. They light the bonfire for some guys that are playing the guitar and all that. And every evening we'll just go sit there with cup of coffee and chit chat. During that, we said, okay, let's start some. And that's how it basically started. So over the coffee at Cafe Farmland, with that background is where we started.
Wonderful. That's really interesting to hear that story of starting Aavenir. Just to extend that question further, Jason, what's the name? How was that coined, right? Aavenir, what does it mean and how did we land up giving that name to the organization?
That is Vivek. Vivek is not here. That question came up yesterday. What's the name? Aavenir, right? Aavenir, so to be honest, when I decided to start a company, I said, okay, what are you going to name? We wanted a name which has a .com domain available. Basic requirement, right? And then I knew that I wanted to do something in future of workspace. That part was clear that I wanted to go in that direction. So future of work is what I wanted to build the name around. And then it became our family project. Two daughters, I and my wife. So okay, start looking for name around future. Right? Started twisting in different ways. Then we went to the Google Translate and started looking for future of work in different languages. We kind of looked at that word from almost all languages. And then we came across Avni with single A, which is in French means future. Avenir. And I checked that domain was also taken. So I said, okay, now I think we're running out of time. I had to incorporate it in a couple of days. So I said, okay, let's put another A in front of that. That makes it easier, call it A. And the reality is, most of the times when the companies are listed, double A is always the first. So that became a byproduct, an important part of that as well. So that's the name.
Wonderful. And I like that kind of, connectivity that, okay, when it is listed at the top, so I think we all should start looking at that, right? That someday it will be listed in top.
Oh, absolutely. And analyst reports, especially when what we are eyeing for in the Gartner report and stuff, even when you are a first entrant, they list down all the vendors. And being double A, we are always going to get the first.
Excellent, brilliant. All right. Since you happen to touch upon the industry, right, Jesal, and you said that you have gone into something which you have been doing, right, for decades. Now, when you started off your journey in CLM, procurement, S2P industry, and when you started off Avni, what did you decide that it will be the core of your organization while you are playing in this industry, which has already been taken by many players, they already have their strong footprint? What was that?
Excellent question. So when I decided to start something, I said, am I going to be one other company in the space? You know, another fish in the pond, in which I did not want to be. So there are a few things, and I've been doing contract management in particular for the last 20 years. And I saw that in last 15, so almost from 2000s, early 2000 onwards to 2015, 16, 17, there are a bunch of contract management companies, but they all looked alike. They all looked alike, they all did the same thing, and to a large extent, a lot of them, including us, do still the same thing, which is process automation. They automate the workflow. That's essentially what it was and what it is even today to a large extent. I think the fundamental shift that has happened in last 3 years, 4 years is the AI. AI started with playing with the structured data. I think the AI models have come a long way in dealing with unstructured content. And contract being document, the clauses, it's an unstructured content. That is fundamentally changing what you could and what you would do as far as the contract and contract related offerings are concerned. So when I started talking to Mr. Anand those days, AI was front and center of that. So that how we are going to do that, the specifics were still unknown. We are still evolving. We are still discovering that to a large extent. But kind of the idea broadly was AI-based contract management where we can help manage the contracts. And the basic premise came even before I started out. When I was in previous organization, attending one of such conferences, we are sponsors. I was on the stage of the panel. One of the audience members raised his hand and said, you know what, we like your product, we use your product, it's great. However, when are you going to give us the autonomous driving experience in this? And I said, huh? What do you mean by that? He said, my paralegal negotiates same contract over and over again every time. She spends 80% of her time just negotiating the same contracts. Can't you just give me a button and click on that and deadlines according to my past history of negotiation? So that was always playing in my mind. And that's the nirvana state that we want to get to. And lately we have been talking about, I know I'm kind of getting ahead, but the CLM AI maturity model that we are developing our own, where we actually taking that to kind of autopilot mode. And that's the direction that we want to take our customers and obviously use our product to help them get there.
So, while we understand the core of your idea here and AI, and of course we wish that we see that day soon, Jesal, how does ServiceNow play its role here? Was there anything that tied up to this vision, or as a platform it offers you something that can get a good head start?
Yeah. So why ServiceNow? The question I get, I think probably I answer once every day, if not more. Either from candidates or from investors, right? So I answer that quite a lot. Why ServiceNow? And I mean, the reality is, the way I look at this industry is, they are kind of largely divided into two camps. One, what I call it customer experience, outward looking customer management kind of tools, which are platforms which are like Salesforce and Gainsights of the world, which are more outward looking. Then there is something called employee experience, which is more inward looking platforms like ServiceNow, the Workdays of the world, Atlassians of the world, which are focusing on your company employees and their productivity improvement, right? So the world is divided into these two camps. Because we are talking about procurement, because we are talking about more inward looking activities, productivity and efficiency improvement, it makes a lot of sense for us to be on one of these inward looking platforms and not Salesforce. Although I was more familiar with Salesforce then, I think somebody asked, Adil, I think you asked me that question yesterday, right? Why ServiceNow? I mean, I was familiar with Salesforce, but had I wanted to do something on customer experience, sales automation, it would make a lot of sense to be on Salesforce platform. But because we are talking about employee productivity, employee efficiency improvement, ServiceNow was the way to go. I did look at this Workday as well. So when I started playing with it, even before I made a call to Anand, I started building an application on ServiceNow, saying that is that platform strong enough for us to let us build a enterprise application on that. I tried that on ServiceNow, I tried that on Workday as well, and I thought ServiceNow has legs that actually get us there. So that's how ServiceNow was.
Again, interesting note to understand about why ServiceNow. Since you haven't started the conversation from the past, right? Let's come on to your present day. 3 years again with same offering, right? Same platform. What would you say that is your experience for past 3 years? When you look back now, today, and you find out that, okay, was that a wise decision, or I should have done something else?
Oh, excellent question, excellent question. And if I have to restate that answer in brief, if I have to start that all over again today, I will still start on ServiceNow. I have no second thought on that, and every day passes, it actually solidifies my belief in the whole the hypothesis that we started with. Right? Platform play is a real thing. Even in such a crowded market, we have an entry. People now recognize us because of that platform play that we play. And the reality is, ServiceNow, I mean, the original hypothesis from our standpoint, first is the platform and then which platform, right? I believe that more and more CIOs, they want to consolidate their offerings to the finite set of platforms, because otherwise, anybody guess how many systems an average enterprise has in their ecosystem? Any guesses? How many systems a company has when they're using internally? 600 plus. An average enterprise has 600 systems. Now think about this, a CIO when they're buying this softwares, every new software brings their own little SaaS cloud. They hate having these clouds and systems talk to each other because no system stand on its own. So they have to make them talk to each other. And by being on the platform, reduces that pain significantly. So in my hypothesis, good organization will have 3 types of platforms. One, an outward-looking platform like Salesforce of the world. An inward-looking platform like ServiceNow or Workday or what have you. And then an infrastructure cloud platform like Azure, Google, AWS and so on and so forth. One of those, right? So these 3-4 platforms can try to bring as many products on those platforms. That's kind of the hypothesis. And today, it is working out more and more real, that more and more customers that we speak to, oh, you are on ServiceNow? I think we'll prefer that you guys work this way. In a lot of deals that we are in today, they are non-compete. We don't even have competition because we are the only game in town. And that, so long story short, if I were to start it today, I'll do that again on ServiceNow.
Yeah, so with that note, right, do we think that this is how it will continue? Because I know that, first of all, Aavenir has survived that whole pandemic thing, right? I don't know whether you will call it as any impeccable timing or how you want to define that, but Aavenir has survived that. Now that when you are setting the foot very strongly, the industry is already talking about recession, right? So now, would that continue for say a couple of more years, or you think that it's time that we have something more to offer? What would be that idea?
So, pandemic was an interesting time. It was an impeccable timing from our funding standpoint. So we had just signed our seed funding term sheet, and pandemic broke out. So I was scared. Will our investor follow through on that promise? Because term sheet is not a legally binding document. They can pull out. And a lot of investors pulled out from their investments. And I was wondering that are investors confident enough that they'll continue with us? And they did. So it took a few months to close the round. That happened in April or May of that year, after the pandemic was in full force. Right? So it started on that note. By that time, we started marketing late 2019. We built good amount of pipeline. I flew down to Australia when the pandemic actually broke out. I was in Sydney. I had to rush out of Sydney, catch my flight because Indian borders were closing and all that, right? So the crazy times there. So I was in Australia trying to close couple of deals, and pandemic happened. One happened to be, but two of them happened to be in travel industry. One happened to be in an oil and gas in Norway, and suddenly pandemic happened, and the entire pipeline dried up. All the work that we had done 6 to 9 months prior to that, all dried up completely. Because travel industry just ceases to exist at that point, right? Oil and gas, there was a parallel fiasco there as well in that market. And the Norway and everything, which is a lot of that whole oil belt, right? In Nordic countries, they also felt big shock. So they completely pulled out of everything that they were doing. And so we are wondering, are we going to stick around? Are we going to be around, right? But 6 months later, we got our first customer. Well, in the first month, we got 3 signed customers. And that was a big step forward. One of them, like MUFG, which you guys are dealing with today, it took 6 months from March 31st to September to close the contract. So first contract they negotiated for like 6 to 9 months. They had to send it to Japan, Tokyo for their parent company to get an approval and all that. So it took that long. But I think that was a proof that we are going to persevere in this tough conditions. And we did. And I think we actually came out of that slump at least once. Now this one, which is now everybody suspecting to be a recession, a kind of a pending recession for everyone. I think we are in much better shape right now. We have existing customer, referenceable customer. We have balance sheet is stronger. I think we probably are going to be in more favorable conditions than others because of this. And our cost structure also is pretty reasonable compared to other companies. Right? Large, blown-up companies is going to have a tough time dealing with their existing 1,000, 1,200, 1,200 people companies, employee companies. Right? So that's where I think we are going to be in better shape coming out of this recession.
Yeah, so let me tell you, Jesal, I'm really liking this conversation because honestly, this story wasn't aware, right? I wasn't aware about this story about how you were stuck in Sydney and how we started off for the first customers. Now that we're talking about customers, right? Well, the journey began from Australia when you were attempting. MUFG happened where the parent is Japan. And today, as we speak, North America is the crux, right? I mean, majority of your customers exist in North America. So is there any intention of keeping focus on a specific demographic, or Avni will be always open to a global reach out?
So Aavenir will always be open to global reach out. I mean, we have been global from day one. Now, I'll tell you the story around why Australia started. Because in my no sense I'm going to start with Australia, right? I would have started with US because that's my family territory, bigger market and everything. So when we started partnership with ServiceNow, because I was in India, ServiceNow gave us a partner manager in Australia, a guy called James Maxwell. And Avni Sahai, who was the head of ISV Alliances for ServiceNow, he advised me that, you know what, if you are experimenting, start with Australia. Because Australia is smaller, it's a smaller replica of your US market. So if you want to experiment something, start with Australia. And you have James there, which is our partner manager. He will connect you with all the ServiceNow AEs and SEs there, and that's where you're going to, because it's a smaller market, like dozen AEs and dozen SEs, it's easier for us to make it to that market. With that mindset, we started with Australia. MUFG happened because this was MUFG US, although parent company was Japan. So they bound us on the App Store, and that's how we landed. But that's kind of the Australia story. That's how we started with Australia. Would I believe Avnish's advice again? Probably not. If I have to start again, I'll probably not start with Australia because I don't believe Australia is the same as US, a smaller version of that. Because Australia works slightly differently. They take time, they don't take big bets on young startups. While US, a lot of US companies are willing to do that. The sales cycles are relatively shorter in US compared to Australia and even in Asian market too. So that's how we started, based on certain advice and conditional situation where, because James was there, I had the ServiceNow. I was just getting into it. So James, being my partner manager, will introduce me to Australian sales team, and that became really easier for us.
Thank you again, Jason, for leading me to the next question, right? You quickly touched upon startups, right? Avni is still treated as startup. And as a leader here, what would be your advice to people? And we see the boom of startups, right? Being a country like North America or India, right? What would be your advice, like as a startup company leader? What are 2 things that you should always focus on to do it right? And maybe 1 or 2 things that you should always avoid?
Oh, that's a tough one. In fact, a day before yesterday only, one of our ex-colleagues, he called me, he is a startup. And he says, I want to grow. What is your advice? And my response to him was, why the hell did you start? Usually people with crazy minds will start startups, especially with 20-25 years, and he's also same years of experience. And you will, if it's a financial gains is the motive, you will have much better ways of getting the financial outcomes with your experience. You probably won't need a startup for that. So you need to have that kida to do something, build something, that's where you start. So the first and foremost, you need to ask yourself, why? Why do I want to start the company? Getting that right answer is very important for you to really think about a startup and doing a startup. That's one. Second, coming for more practical and more actionable items is think about your total addressable market. We are getting this success, especially with investors, is because our TAM is huge. So in investment term, they call it TAM, total addressable market. Total addressable market for our space is $50 billion. They look at that first. Because if they think that if out of $50 billion, these guys will say 0.1% of that slice of that big pie, they still have a significant market share, right? So looking at TAM is very important. Right? So if you're thinking, and I wish some of you guys will go out and start something. You have all my support. In the past, a lot of our team members have done that, and I love that. So if you are going to do that, think about TAM first. I want to play in large TAM market. Just tell yourself that. So that's one. And second, access to talent is going to be the most critical part that you have to think about. That's one of the strength that I was banking on, and I'm still banking on, to be honest. Because in prior life, with the partner in crime with Gaurang and Sneha and all that, we have built large organizations, large teams. So I had access to talent, at least on the technology, the build part of that, right? That is important, because if you start with, okay, I want to build something, but you don't have access to talent, you have a problem. So I think these 2 elements, if they are taken care, the other things will slowly fall in place.
You know what, you're actually reading my mind, Jason, right? Because
I always
because my next question is about people, right? We spoke about technology, we spoke about your ideation. Getting a pool of right set of people. And again, it's a proud moment that we are heading to a journey where we are almost close to 100, where we are like, not few numbers behind, right? But we are almost 60, right? Getting that in a year and a half, because we know that in the first year it was really setting up the grounds. What do you think was the challenge, if at all it existed? Or what do you think was your ace card that worked to get the right set of people so far and to continue having them more?
I think couple of things. One is this whole pandemic thing threw me off completely. Call me an old school guy, and I'm considering, look at these people here, I actually do look like an old school guy, but I'm more comfortable in leading people in person. Right? I'm more used to having meetings, including telling Gaurang to join me was over a tapri, over a chai, right? And that's true for a lot of other people who had worked with me in the past. That's kind of how I feel comfortable talking to people, leading the team. This whole Zoom leadership was a challenge. It started with hiring, recruitment as well. Hiring the right people over Zoom was a little challenge for me. So that became a little bit of impediment for me to building the right team, to be honest. So gaining confidence in people looking into only a Zoom and making a conviction, okay, you know what, I'm going to go after that guy. Yeah, right. So that was a bigger issue for me, not so much an access to talent. We had pool because of our fearless recruiter and the team around and the past pedigree that some of us have, and with the investor name behind us, we had access to talent, but getting them through our own filtration criteria was a little bit of challenge.
So again, if I take in the same context, right, when people are looking to join Aavenir, right, would ServiceNow always be treated as a must-to-have? Or there are other things that you would suggest for people who would be interested in joining Avni, but they may not have a backbone from ServiceNow?
Oh, absolutely. ServiceNow is good to have. It gives you a little bit of head start, but it's definitely not a mandatory skill. Some of these skills we will always train on. Much easier to train somebody on ServiceNow. It's not easy to train somebody on the basics of OOPS or basics of the technology. We look for a person who can build an enterprise application. Just the basics of enterprise applications are common. The basics of database, the basics of performance management, all of those things, security, right? The basics remain same no matter what technology that you use. Largely, we kind of evaluate candidates only on those. And then it's easier if you don't have ServiceNow, that's fine, we'll train you on that.
So there was few questions that when I was interacting with our employees, we always have this mind, right, in our mind, excuse me, that our headquarters in India is based out of Ahmedabad, of course, right, our US entity does exist there. But Ahmedabad has really a good percentage of people. So do we intend to extend that in multiple cities, or Ahmedabad will always remain the headquarters and then people will continue to be remote? What is an idea on that?
So the fact is that we have a larger team in Ahmedabad. Again, thanks to the history and the people that have worked there. The bottom line is, now when I ask Sneha and team to recruit, we don't give them a location anymore. So, okay, we hire here. Hire wherever you can. Our only distinction is India or US. Wherever you can find in India, and you know, I mean, when we interview our candidates, many of the times I don't even know where the candidate exists, where is he located. We just look for the right candidates. Now, if that happens to be where Ahmedabad may not be the majority in that case, that's fine. And some of you will be surprised. Gaurang and I, when pre-pandemic, when we were talking and we were thinking about building the organization, this is summer of 2019, we had decided that this is going to be a distributed organization, this is going to be a remote organization. So this distributed team was not forced upon us by pandemic. It was a pre-planned move even before that. We knew that we are not going to get all the talent that we need in Ahmedabad, and we are going to expand. So we were going to be remote from day one. So fortunately, we were a little better prepared, at least mentally, when pandemic forced us on that.
Now that we are talking about people, Jesal, if I ask you about the culture of Aavenir, how would you like to define that?
Oh, that's a tough one. Never easy to define a word called culture, to be honest. I think a lot of times actions speak louder than words, as we say, right? In majority of the times, your leadership, their actions define the culture. So, culture, there are a few aspects that I really wanted to enforce. Transparency is number one, openness in the approach and the availability. And third, I started building the organization for people. As I said, it didn't start with, oh, I have this idea and I want to build something. I wanted to build an organization. I want to have this. I want to hang out with people. I want to really help people grow and grow in process as well, right? So want to make sure that people have fun along the way. And that's, I know I repeat this partly from our yesterday's town hall, and that you heard me saying quite a bit. But I do not want anybody to be really toiling out, getting tired, and they say, you know what, this job sucks. That's the last thing that I want. I've seen in the past toxic cultures of the company, which can actually hurt you, and it can actually destroy a lot of people, their lives and stuff. We do not want any of that. So I think that's long way of defining, or with the attributes of culture. I don't know how you want to call the culture, but that's kind of the different elements of that, what I would look at.
No, I think you touched upon it at the right parameters. I mean, that's what will define a culture of an organization. Now that we have covered the past and the present, right? How do you see Aavenir in future? Maybe 3 years down the line, and then later 5 and 10 years down the line.
Going to be bigger and better.
Okay.
Right? I think there are two types of companies, to be honest. One is sales-led companies. If you look at in the enterprise software world, Oracle is probably the sales-led company, where sales defines what you want to do, and sales, I mean, they are after. Okay? And then the other type of companies called product-led companies. So ServiceNow is a product-led company, they are not a sales-led company, where they first build the product and then they figure out to sell it. And we talked about a couple of examples yesterday during open house as well. So I think we are going to be we are and will continue to be a product-led company. The basic attributes of a product-led company is innovation, and technology and technical team is their strength, which is even today, if you look at it, we have I think 25 or 30 technical people and another 20 or so non-technical. They are still technical, but they are not coding. So if you really look at purely technical and non-technical, you probably have 2 guys in sales, 3 guys in sales, and remaining is all everything else, right? So we are a heavily product-led company. We'll continue to be operating in that fashion on how, as a company, we are going to grow. And what that means is that we are going to get a lot more innovative. We are going to continue building some new cool stuff. That's kind of from a product standpoint how we are likely to be. I think 3 years, 5 years, we will be on the magic quadrant. I have no doubt in my mind. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind we will be in magic quadrant the way we are heading there. We have got something cooking here. And I every time I speak to someone who knows about this industry, who has been here, it resonates. And most people, I've heard this term very often, you are on to something. And that tells me that we are going to be there. We are going to be in magic quadrant, and then upward and onward from that point on.
Yeah, let me first say amen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of you guys, people who have been in this industry, who has joined thinking that we are on to something. Right? So that kind of, lot of people here, I don't know what somebody like Anand was thinking when he joined me, but people who lately joined, they have seen the idea, they've seen something in action, and then you kind of put a trust on me and us. So you believe that you are on to something.
Absolutely. I don't think so. This conversation will be complete if I don't touch upon your ideas about the customer side, right? We are talking about a product, and I'm sure you have a fair idea about whom do you want to sell it to, right? Is there any peculiar idea about, are we focusing on certain domain? You want to really focus on a vertical based offering, or you would stick to something like what Avni is describing itself as S2P? How would you talk about the customers today and moving forward?
So currently our customers we are pretty horizontal. We have customers from all possible domains, right? Healthcare, finance, financial services, government, food, everything, kind of all kinds of industries. And I think we'll continue to be like that. However, just because of the industry compliance requirements, we will probably get a little more attention from financial services, telco, healthcare. Just because of regulatory compliance requirements there, we are probably get a little more attention from them, and they are cash rich as well, right? CPG is not really cash rich, so that also matters, right? So we might get a bit of concentration there, but we will always be fairly horizontal in my mind, because this is a horizontal problem. This is not a vertical problem. Although these days there is a whole new concept called vertical SaaS, right? I don't think I subscribe to that for our purpose. So I think from our standpoint, we are going to continue to be in that space. Currently, our customer base, our sweet spot is 1,000 to 5,000 employees. And that's not because our product does not work for large organizations. It's just because we are young and mega companies are not not mega. Large companies are not going to take big chances with a startup. And hence 1,000 to 5,000 is a sweet spot for us. And we'll continue growing, we'll continue going up market eventually.
Wonderful, Jesal. Again, we would like to thank you wholeheartedly that we could have this conversation with you. And as I said earlier, right, some of the insights that you gave us today, particularly your ideation, then why Australia and things like that. I'm sure many people had that, including me, right? So thank you. I wish we should have this again, such similar session, maybe 3 years where it is bigger and better, right? And when Double A's is starting to show its magic. What do you say?
Absolutely.